Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Justice, and I am currently the Community Outreach Intern with MadiSUN. In just a moment, I'll pass it over to my colleague, Sam Deniski, who will be leading this presentation. The presentation will be about 30 minutes and will feature two of our installers, Full Spectrum and Arch Electric. Then we'll leave time at the end for an open question session. If you do have questions throughout the presentation, though, feel free to put them in the chat, use the Q&A function or the raise hand function. We are recording this and it will be posted to the events page on our website if you wish to rewatch or share any portion. And with that, I'll pass it over to my colleague, Sam.
Thank you, Justice. Thank you, everyone, too, for joining us, and happy Earth Day as well. Very exciting day to be holding our first webinar of the season. I'm going to go ahead and start my slideshow here. So as Justice said, I am Sam Deniski. I am the Distributed Renewable Energy Program Director here at Renew, Wisconsin. Renew is a nonprofit that does renewable energy programs, policies, and advocacy across the state of Wisconsin. I've been with Renew now for about 3 years, and this will be my 4th year administering the MadiSUN program. And Renew administers MadiSUN on behalf of the City of Madison. So this is a city-led program, and we're very happy to be administering and leading this program and managing it once again. So I just want to thank everyone again for being here tonight. We're going to be talking about solar. And I want to start off this conversation by noting that the photo there in the center, that is a photo of my dad and my extended family. And this is not from Madison, unfortunately. They actually live in Minnesota, in northern Minnesota. And the reason I like to start off every presentation with this is because I like to show people that, even solar can even work in places like northern Minnesota. So if it can work there, it can definitely work here in Madison as well. I'm going to be talking a little bit about the agenda. We're going to talk first a little bit about how solar works. We're going to talk about why solar is possible, especially even in a state like Wisconsin. And then we're going to talk about the economics of solar as well. So I want to talk a little bit about how solar works. We might all be coming from different backgrounds, different levels of knowledge. So I just want to kind of make sure everyone is sort of on the same playing field. And to do that, we're going to talk about, first of all, the components of a solar PV system or a solar photovoltaic system. All of the solar that we're talking about tonight will be photovoltaic. There are some old solar hot water and some other solar type of energy generation devices and projects out there, but we're going to be strictly talking about solar PV tonight. And solar is actually pretty simple when you boil it down. For the most part, there's really only 2 components to a solar system, and that is the solar module, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, those panels that look black or kind of a dark navy blue color. And then maybe the other component that most people might not be as much aware of is the inverter. The inverter kind of does the behind the scenes work. So we all kind of know what the solar panels do, of course. They convert sunlight into electricity. Those little squares within the solar panel there are called the solar cells. Most solar panels are comprised of about 72 cells. However, there are some panels that are comprised of just 60 cells, so that's just a little bit smaller in dimensions. The 72 cell panel, is roughly the size of like your standard door or door frame. And then the 60 cell panels are just a little bit shorter than that, but they're about the same width. They're really simple, mostly just made out of silicon and some aluminum along the side. And so it's a chemical reaction that takes place within the solar panel. There's no moving parts, which actually is really great because it means there's very little, if any, maintenance that has to go on with a solar system. The panels also all have 25-year warranties as well, so we expect them to last a really long time. And like I said, without any moving parts or anything to break down, these systems can last 20, 30, maybe even 40 years. So the other component, of course, of the solar system is the inverter. And what that does is it converts the direct current, which is what is made by the panels, into alternating current, which is typically what our TVs, our appliances, our lights use within our home. Most of these inverters have a 12-year warranty. I'm sure our solar installer friends will correct me if I'm wrong, because it obviously varies between brand. And the inverters can actually get really technical. They can also provide, they can connect to monitoring equipment, so you can check how much electricity your solar array is making, either on a desktop computer. A lot of people now are using phone apps as well to check and see how much energy they're making during the day, how much, you can also check to see how much you're consuming as well. So you can kind of just see the whole system at work, your whole home system at work. My dad, from the photo before, has only ever had 2 cell phones, and he bought a iPhone when he got his solar array, just so he could kind of keep up with the monitoring, because he's a big nerd like I am. So this is sort of a visual component, visual picture, excuse me, of how a solar array works. So as you can see, the sun there hits your solar panels, that excites the electrons within the panels, and those electrons get channeled down some wires. The wires take you to box number 2, which is where the inverter is, again, the other component of the system, and that's where it gets converted from DC to AC. And from that point, it flows through your circuit box and then out into your home, out into your appliances, your lights, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of times, I'm going to kind of transition a little bit here, but a lot of times during the middle of the day, especially on a nice sunny day like this, which I feel like we haven't gotten too many of lately, you are going to actually, your solar array is going to actually produce more electricity than what you need. So when all of your home's electric needs are met, what will happen is that electricity then will go back to number 4. So it'll go out through your meter and out onto the grid. It'll go down to your neighbor's neighbor, et cetera, et cetera. And at that point, your electric meter will essentially spin backwards. I think now the meters are now actually digital. They're not analog, but that meter will dial backwards, and it will give you a credit that you can use for later on. And that policy is called net metering. So in the day, that's how your system works. The sun, like I said, hits the panels, it flows to your inverter converts it into AC, alternating current, excuse me, then it powers your home. Any excess, like I said, produced goes out onto the grid, and you get a credit for that. Then at night, when the sun is not shining, you will take in electricity off the grid, just as you do now. So it will flow back in through your meter. Your meter will then essentially dial forward, and all the electricity will go to your home. So this is a grid-tied solar array. This is probably what 99.99% of all of the solar arrays, certainly in Wisconsin, are now. There is a lot, certainly, of interest. Folks I have heard of, kind of going off grid. There's a lot more to going off grid than I think a lot of people think. Not only involves battery backups and some other backup ancillary devices, but it also involves a lot of lifestyle changes as well. There is one other component that's not in here that could potentially be in here, and that is the battery component. Batteries are very expensive, but they are an option this year with some of our installers, so we can certainly talk about that more. A battery system would get powered by your solar if you choose to set it up that way, and then you can store that power for later if the grid goes down, or if you just want to access those electrons at certain times of the day, maybe when you may need them. So for the most part, that's how a solar array works. We can talk a little bit more about net metering, because net metering kind of acts in some ways. I like to kind of explain it kind of like a virtual battery. So, all of those kilowatt hours that you produce, that your solar array produces in excess, will flow back out onto the grid. And then, like I said, you'll get a credit for that. If you're in Madison Gas and Electric territory, you can roll those credits over, not just from sunny days to not just from day to night, and not even just from one day to another day, but you can actually roll it over for multiple months as well, which is very exciting. Essentially, though, what net metering is again, you just pay the net of your meter. So as you produce excess electricity, that meter spins backwards. And then when you take in electricity off the grid, that meter, will spin forward. So this is kind of a way of banking electricity, or in some ways almost using it like as a virtual battery. I keep using the analogy rollover electricity. For those of us that are old enough to remember what rollover minutes on a cell phone looks like, a cell phone plan looks like, that's kind of it. You're basically able to take that energy and use it for later when your solar array is not producing as much electricity as you need. So this is more of a visual representation of what net metering looks like. This is the production from an actual solar array. It was taken back in 2017. I probably need to update this with a more current one, but for now it still works well. So the area under the red line, or the area shaded in red, that is where this homeowner, that is where this home is using electricity. So as you can see, electricity, it kind of spikes a lot, even during, overnight hours, certainly throughout the day as well. But it's pretty erratic. Your home does not use electricity quite as steadily as you may think. In contrast to that, this person's solar array actually produces very steady electricity. So as you can see, just a little bit before 8 o'clock, about 7:30, I think this is in late September when we start getting into the fall months. So the sun rises, the solar array kicks in, it starts producing electricity, continues to do so. It continues to increase its electricity until about 1 o'clock or so in the afternoon. And then, the sun starts to dip in the horizon, and that's when the production kind of falls off until roughly about 6 o'clock or so at night. And that's when the solar array shuts off completely, because that's when nightfall sets in. And then, as you can see, the home continues to kind of use electricity sporadically throughout the evening. So the area in the green, that's where the solar electricity, that's where the solar that's produced is actually being produced in excess. So all of that area in green is being exported to the grid, and this person is getting credit for that. The area in blue is the area where the solar that's being produced is being used on site in real time. So as you can see, the area in blue is actually a pretty small amount. So it really shows the value of net metering, and why it's really good to be able to take that area in the green and kind of be able to essentially shove it into those areas in red, so you can offset that electricity that you use, at times of the day when your solar array is not producing any electricity. So that's kind of how solar works. That's how net metering works. I want to explain a little bit about what makes for a good solar home, or a solar ready home. The first thing we look for is an unshaded roof. If you have trees, buildings, other objects blocking your rooftop, that is going to make it really hard for you to produce any kind of electricity from your solar panels. So we definitely want to look for a roof that is unshaded and there are no trees or any other objects blocking it. The second thing we look for, believe it or not, is a newish roof. I put new-ish. You don't have to have a brand new roof, certainly, but the newer the roof, the better. The reason for that is these panels, like I said, can last 25 years or more. So it's really important to go in with as new a roof as possible, because a typical shingle roof will last about the same amount of time as your solar panels will. And we definitely don't want to, we don't want to have you to replace your roof halfway through your solar project, because obviously that is going to take some time out of your day to schedule someone to come and remove the panels, disconnect the system, redo the roof, and then reconnect the system again. So ideally, you want the roof to be, you want the glue on the shingles to dry, and then be able to put the solar panels on right on top of it. A south-facing roof is best. However, now with upgrades in panel technology and with the benefits of net metering, east-west rooftops are okay as well, provided they are not shaded. And then the last thing we talk about is, although it really should be one of the first things to talk about because it's one of the easiest to do, is an energy efficient home. I always tell people that the cheapest kilowatt hour you buy is the one you don't ever have to use to begin with. So if you have, old light bulbs, old appliances, old, TVs, other electronics, etc., you want to try to upgrade those first if you can. Not so much in the insulation front, because that's more heating. I mean, if you have electricity for heating, you definitely want to make those upgrades as well. But you want to think about how your home uses electricity and how you can make that more efficient as well. So that's sort of the how the solar works part of the presentation. Now we're going to talk about why solar in Wisconsin. A lot of people ask this, whether they are pro-solar or anti-solar, or pro-renewables or anti-renewables. There's a ton of reasons, but I think most of us can certainly agree that Wisconsin is not, California, it's not Arizona, it's not something we maybe jumps to mind. But solar definitely can work in Wisconsin. One of the main reasons for that is the price has dropped significantly in the last decade, anywhere from about 75% to closer to 90% drop in costs for solar across the board. 90% is closer for larger, utility scale size installations, but the price has definitely dropped a lot on the residential scale as well. So this graph right here indicates the yellow line, I should say, indicates where the price of solar has gone. And again, this is a blended cost, so it's not just residential, it's residential, commercial, and utility scale as well. But that line indicates where the prices have gone for solar in the last decade. The blue bars indicate the amount of solar that's been installed. So as you can see, as we ramp up production, as we ramp up these solar projects, as we build more, as we introduce economies of scale into the equation, that price continues to come down. It continues to come down even today. However, it's not certainly going to drop as much as it did, say, between 2010 and 2015, but it continues to fall, and we continue to put more solar projects into the pipeline. So that's very exciting. So solar, very affordable now, not just for the very wealthy. Solar is also really reliable too. I think a lot of folks think that the intermittency of solar means that it's not very reliable. As you saw from that net metering graph, the curve is very steady. This nice little GIF here shows even more reasons why solar is reliable. Those panels are not just little thin panes of glass, they're actually really hard plexiglass. I kind of like to, I liken them to like a basketball backboard, it's kind of a plexiglass material. They're really strong. They can withstand up to golf ball size hail. They can withstand up to hurricane force winds, especially panels now that are flush mounted to the roof. They're not kind of standing at a weird angle anymore for the most part. And the other sort of meteorological component that a lot of people ask, especially in Wisconsin, is about snowfall. Obviously, it snows a lot in Wisconsin. It was snowing yesterday. Thankfully, none of it stuck. But snowfall is certainly a concern. If you have a solar array and we get a big snowfall, you're not going to produce electricity for a day or so. The good thing is, these panels, as you can see, they're a darker color. There's typically always at least a little bit of electricity kind of running through them. So they stay a little bit warmer. And, they're kind of a slippery surface too. So typically what will happen is, eventually that snow will melt off of that panel and the rest of it will just slide off because it is, of course, at an angle when it's on your rooftop. We always tell folks, even if we get a really bad snowfall, even if it's one of those, 12-inch snowfalls and then it gets really cold, don't try to remove that snow. It will melt eventually. It is certainly frustrating when you can't be making electricity, but the last thing you want to do is damage your panels and void the warranty as well. Another reason why it's great to install solar is these are homegrown jobs as much as they could possibly be. I'm sure our installers that are on the line will talk a little bit more about this as well. These are jobs that certainly cannot be outsourced to any other areas. The folks that are going to install your arrays are going to be folks that live in your neighborhood. And as you can see here, over the last decade, the amount of solar that we've installed mirrors pretty closely to the amount of jobs that we've added into the fray as well. So definitely helping out the local economy by going solar as well. You also are going to kind of be helping out sort of your own, not your own economy, but your own pocketbook as well. And not just by offsetting electricity. You're going to increase the value of your home. So this was a study that was done from the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, which is in Colorado. So it wasn't a study done in the Midwest, unfortunately, but it showed that solar powered homes sold for 20% faster and for 17% more than equivalent non-solar homes across subdivisions. So what that means is, say you and your neighbor have a home that's basically about the same size, about the same age, so it's about the same value. If you add solar to your home, it's going to add much more value to your home, and it's going to sell for faster than your neighbor, assuming you and your neighbor might be selling at the same time. So it's a really good investment for your home, and we're going to talk more about that investment coming up here in a few moments. In fact, we're going to talk about it right now, actually. So I don't know if there's any chats, or excuse me, if there's any questions yet in the chat or the Q&A. And I'm just going to pause here to just take a little sip and see if there are any questions.
Hey, Sam. Yeah, I'm not seeing any questions, but I'll just say it again for folks that may have joined us a few minutes after I had said this, but you are welcome to throw any questions in our chat or use the Q&A function. We'll also have an open question session at the end.
Thank you, Justice. Yep, so now we're getting to the part that I'm sure everyone wants to hear the most about. How much does this cost, and what are some ways that maybe I can save? So we're going to be talking about that. So we're going to start off with actually incentives, and we're going to start with focus on energy. So if you don't know what focus on energy is, I highly suggest that as soon as this webinar is done, you check that out on Google. Focus on Energy is a statewide energy efficiency program. They have a bunch of programs, everything from free light bulbs, free shower heads, things like that, to rebates for solar arrays. They provide a bunch of different energy efficiency programs. Their programs are extremely effective. In fact, Focus on Energy is literally the most effective energy efficiency program in the country. For every $1 we invest into Focus on Energy, it yields $5 in savings throughout the state. I'm going to get off my soapbox now about Focus on Energy, but I really cannot overemphasize how important the Focus on Energy program is. And when we talk about it through the lens of solar, we're talking about rebates for renewable energy and specifically for solar arrays. So right now, the current rebate, if you qualify for a Focus on Energy rebate, is $500. There are some requirements. Your rooftop, has to be within 90 degrees of due south, which basically means it can be anything from due east all the way down to due south and then back to due west. So basically anything that's not north facing, but your rooftop also has to be less than 10% shaded. So it is a somewhat strict qualifier, but if you do qualify for that, it's a $500 rebate. There are some folks that might be able to qualify for a $1,000 rebate. Those folks would be in rural zip codes. Unfortunately, I don't know exactly what those zip codes are off the top of my head, but I think if you check out the Focus on Energy website, you can find out if you happen to live in one of those zip codes. The other big incentive or rebate is the federal tax credits. And these are very important because they comprise a pretty large share of the cost of the solar array. It's also really important because thankfully at the end of last year, those tax credits were extended. They were supposed to continue ramping down over the next few years. In 2019, they were actually at 30%. Last year, 2020, they got reduced to 26%. They were slated to go down to 22% this year, but thankfully they got extended. So they're going to remain at 26%, not only for this year, but also for 2022 as well. So that's very exciting news. We've seen a lot of studies that show that more solar or more renewable energy gets installed when these tax credits are in place. So very exciting news on that front. Again, they're going to ramp down to 22% in 2023. And then unless another bit of legislation or action at the federal level takes place, those rebates, those tax credits, will go away for residential installations in 2024. They will remain at 10% for commercial and utility scale installations in 2024 and for longer, but for residential arrays, they will go away at that point, again, unless something happens. So now we're going to run through what I call like a solar cost exercise. So the average size solar array in Wisconsin is about 5 kilowatts. This might be a little bit misleading because every solar array needs to be sized to the exact needs of a home. I like to use the analogy of, asking someone what is the typical size solar array is kind of like going into the Gap and asking for the typical size pair of jeans, right? Like it might fit you, but most likely it's not going to fit you. You need to find the one that fits you. So this is just, for a cost exercise. So we're going to take that 5 kilowatt array, but again, that's just mathematical average. So through the MadiSUN program, again, we have 3 different installers. They're each offering different prices. Roughly, though, that price is going to come out to about $14,500 if we use this, again, 5 kilowatt hypothetical array. Assuming you qualify for a Focus on Energy rebate, that will take $500 off. The federal tax credits will remove another $3,600 plus, and that will leave you with an out-of-pocket cost of a little over $10,000. So you can kind of see, obviously these rebates are going to change a little bit, and the out-of-pocket cost and the total cost are going to change a little bit, of course, between system sizes, between installers as well. But this hopefully should give you an idea, a rough estimate at least, of some of the costs that are involved. And we can certainly go over more costs later on if you want. Larger systems typically have a smaller price per watt. Obviously, the total price is still going to be more, but because of bulk purchasing and things like that, larger arrays are a little bit less expensive per watt. Similarly, if you need a really small array, those systems are going to cost a little bit more per watt, but they're obviously still going to be less than a larger array would. So now that we know, what our solar array might cost, or at least what a hypothetical solar array might cost, we can kind of calculate the value of that solar array. So typically in a year, we get so many hours of sunlight. I forget exactly what that equation is, but we have a few different utility options here. Most of us are probably on Madison Gas and Electric, which is the 13 plus cents per kilowatt hour. If you're on Alliant, it's around 12 cents per kilowatt hour. And if you're with a municipal utility, like a Stoughton or a Sun Prairie or a Wanakee, you're going to be down around 10 cents per kilowatt hour. So this just kind of goes to show you, depending on which utility you're a part of, these are going to be roughly your cost savings, again, assuming you have like a 5 kilowatt array. So a 5 kilowatt array in MG&E territory is going to offset approximately $800 per year. And that's, again, based off of the system size and the amount of usable or sunny hours that we get in a typical year. So, excuse me, now that we know what that figure is, we can also calculate a payback exercise, which is also a really easy way to kind of calculate your return on investment. So because most of us are MG&E customers, an average savings of about $800 per year with that $10,000 out-of-pocket array is going to take you about 10 years to pay off. Obviously, this is going to change a little bit from year to year and from system to system. Most systems, however, will pay for themselves in about 10 years. If you happen to switch to a time of use rate, which both Madison Gas and Electric and Alliant have, you might actually be able to speed up that payback period. So what a time of use rate is, basically what it means is certain times of day, the utility will charge you more or less. So there are peak times. Typically, these are during the day, the afternoon, and the early evening hours. And then they have off-peak hours, which are overnight in the morning. And if you can actually go to that time of use rate, if you can be real strategic about things like when you do your laundry, when you run your dishwasher or your air conditioning, you can speed up that process and probably get it down to as little as 7 years. So the paybacks are really, really important. A lot of people certainly want to know what that is like. This is something that's a lot easier to calculate than the payback of, say, windows or insulation or other kind of energy efficiency measures. And we can also calculate how much savings your array will generate over its lifespan. So if we take about a 30-year lifespan, which is certainly doable with the panels now, that equates to over $20,000 in savings over that 30-year lifespan. So it represents some really, really big savings in the long run. But again, you have to think about this in times of years, if not decades. So that's about it. So these are kind of the steps to installing. Some of you may have gone through some parts of this process already. So the first is a phone call with us here at MadiSUN. We'll discuss things like your electric use. We'll discuss things like your rooftop through satellite imagery. We'll go over your estimated system size, your cost, all the rebates you might be able to qualify for. We'll help you, if solar is not really an option for you, we can certainly recommend some other things as well. If it is an option for you, then what we'll do is we'll schedule a site assessment with one or more of our contractors. From that point on, our contractors will give you an assessment. They will evaluate your rooftop in more detail. They'll take a look at your electric panel as well, and they'll also kind of go over some of their own materials. They'll discuss, what kind of panels they're going to be using, and their inverters as well, and things like that. After that, if that all looks good, what will happen is they'll issue you a proposal that will detail the specific size and the type of the array and kind of the layout of it as well. It'll also cover more specific costs, prices, and rebates as well. And then if that looks good, you will be issued a contract. And then once you sign the contract, then your solar array will be installed. So that's kind of the breakdown. I was just talking with one of our installers earlier. They said they are currently running about 2 months total wait time. So from start to finish, the entire process only takes about 2 months. That's certainly going to change as we get further along into summer and more folks sign up, not just for MadiSUN, but sign up to do solar in general. And so that's about all I have for you. I'm going to stop sharing my screen right now and actually turn it over to one of our installers, Ted. Ted is from Full Spectrum Solar. Full Spectrum has been one of our solar installing partners now for, I think this is our 6th year with them. And after that, I'm going to turn it over to my other friend, Stanley, who is with Arch Electric. So Ted, I'm going to let you have the floor first. And yeah, just tell us a little bit about Full Spectrum and what you all do.
All right, thank you, Sam. I'm Ted. I'm a project manager with Full Spectrum Solar. We've been in Madison about 20 years. Our crews consist of engineers, master electricians, NABCEP certified installers. All our roofers have plenty of experience working with PV. Yeah, there's not really too much to say. I just hope we can help you out and help you go green. So that's about all I got, Sam. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Ted. And Stanley is from Arch Electric. Arch has certainly been in the business for many years. And thankfully now they have opened up a Madison office as well. And we're really excited to have them on board too. So Stanley, please tell us a little bit more about Arch and yourself and what you all do.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. Arch has been doing solar in Wisconsin since 2003. And we do projects from 10 to 10,000 panels. So whether it's a residential project like most of the folks on the call are interested in, or more of the small utility scale, we've got experience with those. What I'd really just like to say is that, you've got good options in this group purchase program to support local Wisconsin businesses. And that when you're making the decision to go solar, don't let someone convince you that you need to make the decision tomorrow or yesterday, or there's folks out there outside of this group buy that might really push you to make a decision. And a purchase that's going to last 30 years, I think you can take the time, ask all the questions you have, revise the design you've got, and make sure that you're getting something that's going to work for you. And I think we're just really honored to be part of this. And if folks have interest in batteries, I just want to mention that I think ourselves and others in the group buy can help with that. It's something we're really excited about. The batteries are more of an early adopter technology at this point. There's not a huge financial reward to investing in batteries, other than the fact that you're supporting the growth of that next level technology in clean energy, and you're supporting self-generation and obviously battery backup when the grid goes down. So we're really happy to be part of this, and thanks for having us.
Great, thanks, Stanley. Really appreciate that. Really happy to have you on board. I did also want to mention too to folks that there are options. As Stanley said, there are battery options as well. There are also options for electric vehicle charging too, if that's something you might be interested. If you either have an electric vehicle or you're interested in purchasing one in the near future, there are options for that. There's also other options. I'm sure the guys can talk through those in the Q&A part, which we're going to get to shortly. I also do want to make one quick mention as well that we have partnered with 2 different organizations to offer financing for solar as well. There's many different ways that you can pay for your solar system. Some folks pay with cash or savings. Some folks will do a home refinance loan or something like that, especially if they have other home projects that they're working on. And another option also is actually a solar specific loan. So what we can do there is we have partnered with an organization called Green Penny and also another organization called Clean Energy Credit Union. Justice, if you could put the links to those 2 organizations in the chat, that would be great so folks can check those out. Both of them offer ways to apply for solar online. They also offer ways you can call over the phone as well and talk about your situation and what you're looking for. The rates are pretty competitive as far as I know, but that is an option as well. So I just wanted to make sure folks know that, you don't necessarily have to have $20,000 saved up right now in order to go solar. You can install today or very soon and start saving money on your electricity bill and start saving the environment today or tomorrow or whenever you get your solar installed. So that is about all I have. I'm going to turn it over to Q&A. I think I think Justice has actually allowed folks to talk. So if anyone has any questions, now is the time. Feel free.
You must have done a good job explaining it, Sam.
I guess so. Or everyone is shy.
I think we do have a question.
We do have someone is raising their hand.
I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you.
Yep.
I don't see my face here, but it doesn't matter. It's probably better. So my question is regarding the solar panels. Where the solar panels come from? Is this like made in USA, or is it how quality? I mean, I guess there's more than one brand, I suppose, but where the materials come from?
Yeah, it depends on a lot of. I think both of our contractors are offering different brands, but I will let them. Stanley, I'm going to give that one to you first. Talk about which panels you're using, and then Ted, I'll let you go afterwards.
Yeah, we're actually using REC Panels, which is a European company that produces all of their equipment and materials in Singapore. And we actually have other options from LG that would be an American-made product. But what we're really focused on is that sweet spot between the best possible warranty, degradation, and those factors, and then also balancing that with cost. So with an LG, for example, you could have that American-made product. It's just going to cost a little bit more. But just to be really clear, Americans aren't the only ones that have figured out how to make panels. I mean, just to be really clear about it. And I wouldn't let that dissuade you or think that, hey, that panel's made in China or that panel's made elsewhere. I wouldn't let that necessarily be an indicator of the quality. I would look at the specs and read reviews online about that brand and then that specific model of panel if you really want to dig into it. I hope that helps answer your question.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, we at Full Spectrum Solar, our main workhorse are Helene modules, which are made in Minnesota. They're a Canadian company. I guess our philosophy, we're in the same boat with Arch there. We want to hit that sweet spot where you get the best of all three worlds with degradation, price, and efficiency and warranties. We just find that they're the best for us. And we try to keep things as local as possible in the US, if possible, even closer, like Minnesota. So, and we tend to buy those directly from the manufacturers. So we have a personal relationship with who we're buying from. So that's been our main workhorse, but also with Arch, we can get you anything you want. If you want to get a premium like LG or Panasonic, we've definitely done that before. So
I have one more question, if I can ask.
Yeah, go ahead.
So what is the relationship between the you guys companies and the MadiSUN? Is where benefit do we get besides obviously all this great information? Do we get a better price or versus going directly?
Stanley, you can take that one.
Yeah, I didn't know someone else. It's hard to see anyone else. The real main benefit is, yeah, you are getting a bit of a price break over, I think, most of the contractors' regular price. And then you're also, frankly, you're supporting an organization that has really laid the groundwork in Renew Wisconsin, and then also MadiSUN. These groups are laying the groundwork for hundreds and thousands of people to go solar, and not just supporting these three contractors, but supporting the whole industry in the state. So, you could definitely get quotes outside of the group buy. There's no one going to stop you from that. You might find one that's a better price, but here you've got some vetted contractors, three of them, that people who have gone solar themselves or have experience have vetted all three of us. And I think that the element of just knowing who's going to do the work and the relationship between MadiSUN and the installers is really just that they support us in their work with policy, and we make their air cleaner to breathe.
Ted, do you want to add anything to that from Full Spectrum's perspective?
no, that was a pretty good answer. So
It was. Yeah, I just,
anyway.
Right. I just want to, well, first of all, Stanley, thank you. That's very nice of you to say. But yeah, the main aspect I really want to drive home as being part of the group buy is we just make it really easy for you folks. We this way you don't have to call and figure out, who's a good contractor and who's not a good contractor. We do all that legwork for you. We make sure all of these guys are experienced. They understand the permitting process and everything else as well. So yeah, that's the only thing I want to add is we just make it real easy. The price is lower, but also just for the ease and the peace of mind, I don't think can do much better than us, quite frankly. But obviously, I'm a little bit biased. I do see another question in the chat, and that is, are metal roofs okay? And metal roofs certainly, standing seam metal roofs are definitely okay. But I would like, I'd like Ted and Stanley to, I would like Ted and Stanley to elaborate a little more on that. And Ted, if you want to go first, that would be great.
all right, yeah, standing seam is actually preferred a lot of the time. They're very easy to install, and we don't need to make any penetrations. We can just clamp onto the seams there. So the only difference would be is you would have exposed conduit wrapping around the edge of the roof rather than coming out of soffit. So if aesthetics are super important to you, then that might be an issue, but most people are totally fine with it because we're not putting holes in their nice roof. So yeah, standing seam is definitely preferred, but asphalt works just as well. So
yeah, and the only thing I would add is even if you've got more of like a corrugated style roof, there's definitely products that can work for that. But yeah, if you're willing to put the extra investment in a standing seam roof, I mean, he's absolutely right. That's, as far as metal roofs go, that's a lot better than like a metal shingle is definitely still a viable product for solar, but it's a lot more labor intensive. So we actually, we installed one for a former Renew employee, we shall just say, and his house has these metal shingles, and it was really, really, really difficult to install. So if you're going to go with something like that, let your installer know up front so they can factor that time in and you don't get surprised later on. But yeah, standing seam would be the first choice.
Excellent. Okay, are there other questions? Oh, Roberto, I see your hand up, but I wasn't sure if that was up from before or not.
Yeah, it's me again. So
That's fine. That's fine.
my roof is pretty much 30 years old, and it's time to change it. And during your presentation, you mentioned ideal to change the roof at the time that you install the panels. Do you guys offer any solar roofs, kind of like a Tesla shingle type of thing?
Can I please answer this question?
Yeah, go for it.
Oh my God. I mean, are you excited to answer this? So the Tesla roof is a very exciting product. There's been a few of them that have been installed in the Midwest. And if it's something that you are really interested in, I mean, we're definitely Tesla installers, and at some point, I'm sure we'll be able to offer those. But to be completely honest, there's technology ready right now that can be deployed. And with like the all black panels that a lot of installers can offer, like the aesthetics aren't quite what they were, 10 years ago when I got started. Everything was like a silver frame, and it wasn't quite, and you'd have panels tilting up off the roof because they were 5 times more expensive back then. So the Tesla roof product is really exciting. It's not the first time somebody's tried to do what we call building integrated PV. And there's a lot of challenges with it. And I'm of the opinion that if I'm going to spend the money, I would rather have something that's got the NREL track record, National Renewable Energy Lab, and these traditional frame modules, while maybe not as sleek and exciting as a Tesla roof, I think that they're a vetted and well-known quantity, well-known entity, I should say. So,
In terms of price, is it cheaper probably to install a metal roof and panels versus solar roof?
depends on if you're asking Tesla or not. I would say that yes, the standing seam metal roof and traditional panels should be more cost competitive. It's also just a question of availability. I've seen one project in Wisconsin with a Tesla roof, and we did a little digging because we're like, what gives? We would love to offer that product. That person had a connection. They had to make phone calls for weeks and months and years to actually get the first one in the state. And we're definitely monitoring it closely. So if you're thinking that you might want to wait a few years and let that play out, do that. I just, in general, I just think there's a lot of reasons to like make sure it's exactly what you want. If you decide you want the Tesla roof, call us in a couple of years and we'll get you the Tesla roof. But you're going to be waiting at least, I would guess, a couple of years before you see it really out there. And maybe Full Spectrum's got other intel than I do, but I haven't seen the product actually available.
We're in the same boat. We install their car chargers and everything, but yeah, in terms of their home batteries, I forget what they're called, but that stuff just isn't out there in Wisconsin yet. So you'd have to wait on that one.
Yeah, the roof in particular. Yeah, the power walls are difficult to get, but you can get them. They just take a little while. But the roof is, if you've got one, I mean, we'd love to take a crack at installing one. So if you can track one down, if you can call up Elon, get him on the phone, and he delivers it, we'd love to install it. But it's just not there yet.
Do you guys install roofs and panels or just panels?
Just panels, at least us. We don't have any roofers.
We have a lot of former employees that were roofers, or at least several of them. And I'm sure Full Spectrum does too, it looks like. But in general, we flirted with the idea of having a roofing division. But really what it comes down to is it's hard enough to find people to do the solar install because it's a hard job. And if we find someone that's willing to do that, we want our people focused on repetitions of that work, getting good at that. And we have some really good roofing partners that do from a metal roof to a shingled roof. And we find that it's typically better to just have the customer work with them to get the roof they want lined up. And then we coordinate at that point. Once the contracts are in place, we coordinate with that roofer. And we try to get in, usually with the shingled roof, as soon as we can, usually within a week or so, and get those flashings installed really quickly. So we don't offer roofing, but we've got an operations team that will definitely help coordinate with any roofers that you're comfortable with.
Okay, we got a few more questions that have come in the chat, and I see some hands raised as well. So I'm going to try to get to everyone as quickly as we can here. The first question is from Mike, and that's what happens if the roof needs to be changed? How much of an added expense would that be? I know you guys just said you're not roofers, but hopefully you can give us a ballpark figure.
So yeah, that's a tough one because it depends entirely on system size and difficulty of roof. Obviously, the steeper and more difficult the roof, the longer it'll take to pull off and put back on. So it's pretty labor intensive, and you're basically reinstalling the system. So it can get up there. I'd say for average 5 kilowatt system, you'd probably be looking at $3 or $4 grand to reinstall. So it's usually better just to re-roof beforehand if you're questioning the integrity of your roof as it sits. And during our site assessments, we'll tell you if we think the tired or shingles are looking tired or anything like that. But bear in mind, we're not roofers by trade, so it's always best to get a professional quote. So
Yeah, and I would, that's pretty much the same. You know, if you've got 10, 15 years left on your roof, you could probably talk me into installing the panels now and having someone come, and because, you know, you're going to need to, I guess the really crazy thing is I put panels up on my garage 6 years ago. I would have never expected that I would replace those panels, because why would you? Well, I did, because panels got a lot more efficient and I get an employee discount at an installer. But so my point is 15 years from now, it may seem crazy to you now to think about, but you might actually be looking to replace those panels anyway. You know, so not that you would just scrap those, you find other people that want to use them, things like that. But if you've got 10 or 15 years and you want to do the roof down the road, that's fine. Anything less than 10 or 15 years though, yeah, just do the roof. You know, if you have a home equity line of credit, you can use that to do the roof. And like Sam said, now the solar that loan is tied to your solar, not to the equity in your home. So they're not competing with each other, and you can kind of do them both at the same time.
Okay, we got another follow-up question. We got a lot of questions, so we're gonna try to get to as many as we can, but I apologize if we don't get to all of them. There's a follow-up here from Mike that's who stands behind the warranty if the original companies go bankrupt? I assume he means the solar panels, but Mike, if you want to unmute yourself, if you're still there, if you want to clarify that. Could do so. Otherwise, I think it's probably for the solar panels. So do you guys want to answer that question?
So yeah, all the warranties are tied to the equipment themselves, not the homeowners. So in the event that we go away, or say you sell your house, those warranties will transfer to the new owner essentially, because it's to the equipment. So we service H&H machines since they went out. We've taken on a couple of their systems. And manufacturers have honored the warranties. So we haven't had any issues in that department.
Yep. And then, yeah, and he's same thing here. You'll find a lot of orphan systems. And it was actually one of the reasons I came to Arch, was the idea of being able to help all these people who got systems. Not all companies are going to make it as far as installation. It's a tough business, I can assure you. As far as the manufacturer's warranty go, you know, that really is based on the success of that company. One thing I'd really point out though, failure rates on modules in particular are really low. And it's, you know, maybe your panels are producing a percentage point less than you want them to 20 years from now, but are you going to try to track down some company? In general, if you pick a good reputable brand like REC, in our opinion, or LG or Panasonic, they're going to be around for the long haul. There's no guarantees. But that's on the equipment side. That's why we try to pick the best possible equipment. Now, there's one thing I was going to mention was microinverters. You didn't really touch on those at all. All of our systems use in-phase microinverters. So the inverters carry a 25-year warranty, and those are actually under each panel. And that's another publicly traded company that is doing really well. And you can kind of see the results of their company publicly. So
I will have to work microinverters into my next presentation, Stanley. I apologize.
I probably have some slides you could borrow, and yeah.
That's okay. We use all micros for this too. So
you're using micros? Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Good to know. Good to know. I definitely will need to change up my presentation. The next question is from Chris, and that is, what is the typical wattage rating of residential panels?
So for our workhorse lean, they're 390, and then there's a smaller 60 cell at 320 watts, and we usually balance those two based on what fits on the roof best. So
Yeah, so we're, his 390 is the taller 72 cell that I think Sam started talking about. And then we've got a 60 frame. All of our residential projects by default, we use the 60 cell frame just because they're easier to work with and we can buy higher quantities. Ours are 360 to 370 watts in that same footprint. So they are up there with the best in the industry as far as the production per panel. So 360 is our lowest and 370 is right now our highest for that shorter panel.
Okay, and I see Mr. Michael Cornell has his hand raised. Mike, would you like to ask a question?
No.
I'm guessing that was a technology mistake.
Okay, my mistake. We'll move on then. Patrick has asked, how newish does the roof have to be? I can start on this one, and that is, like I said, ideally we want to go in with as new a roof as possible, again, because of the longevity of these panels. So, the newer the better. I don't know that there's a strict cutoff because, as I'm sure our installers can tell you, different roofs wear at different rates. A 10-year-old roof in my neighborhood might be way different than a 10-year-old roof in another neighborhood. But you guys definitely should add on to that answer because I'm sure it's not quite sufficient.
that's pretty much it. Is it varies by roof, and we don't really know until we set foot on it, and we'll kind of give you our best estimate and say, hey, we think your roof is due for replacement. You should get a contractor out here to look at it. Or we'll say, no, it's pretty healthy. You probably don't have anything to worry about. So it's a lot of guesswork and trusting professionals when they need to be called in. So
Yeah, and really any reputable roofer is going to give you an honest assessment of that. And what you'll find is a lot of them, you've got a good roofer when they're trying to talk you into waiting a couple of years. If they're not like, oh yeah, this roof should be replaced tomorrow. That to me, if it's obvious that it should be replaced tomorrow, then yeah, go for it. But you might want to get second opinions if someone is too eager to close that transaction. But really, ultimately, it's up to you. Like if you decide you want to go solar and then in 5 years pay someone to pull the panels off and put it back up, I think it's usually for a 5 kilowatt array. It's probably a day's work. So it isn't crazy, but it is obviously better to have a brand new roof if you can make that happen.
Unmute myself here. Okay, so we're almost out of time. I can stay on longer than I can stick around for a little bit longer, but I just want to just see if you guys are able to stick around longer as well.
Yeah.
Okay, then we will
I got a few
continue
minutes.
on. If people want to log off, that's totally fine. I just want to say thanks for coming if you are going to log off. Otherwise, we'll keep rolling with questions. So this question is from Brian, and that is, does the snow sheet come off the panels all at once, or does it more slowly melt off? And then there's another question that Brian has, and that is, any idea if the Biden administration will roll out larger incentives for rooftop solar? And that's probably going to be one I'll have to field. So I'll let you guys take the snow question first.
So snow does tend to avalanche off, as we say. So there are things, especially on metal roofs, there are things to do to slow that down. They do make snow breaks for metal roofs. But with asphalt roofs, since there's going to be snow generally clumped up at the bottom of the array, when it slides off, it'll kind of clump on that and then kind of fall off. It won't be as much of an avalanche. But if you have a slick roof surface like a metal roof, it's going to come off of there pretty quick. So something to consider.
Yeah, I think he covered that pretty well. Actually, I'm sorry. The only thing I would add is just the pitch of the roof is going to affect that a lot. So if you do have a steeper pitch, obviously it's going to shed snow a lot more. My house is only a 412 pitch, so it's pretty slight. And this winter in particular, I mean, it felt like it was covered every day. It was the worst. It just seemed like a really bad winter for snow cover. But it would, eventually break free, and you'd get a few good days there. But winters can be rough. And I guess one thing I'd point out, and I don't know to what extent everybody does this, but we're factoring in losses in our projections for the winter. And we actually, in our document, we're going to show you what the percentages are. And we're talking 50% of the time we expect the panels to be covered by snow in the winter. And as long as you know that going in, it makes it maybe a little easier to accept it. And I know you asked more about the shedding of the snow, but I just wanted to add a little more context.
And I guess not to add even more, but a little bit along with that, like this past February, as he was saying, was brutal. We had like 3 days of production in February. It was just because we had the 2 or 3 inches of ice and then all the snow on top of that. It's not going to melt off. So you just got to wait and hope that you produce a lot more in the summer. So.
Yeah. And then, Brian, as far as the question about the Biden administration goes. So, Renew does renewable energy policy. Most of that policy work, though, is done at the state and local level. So I'm certainly not trying to punt on this question, but I'm really optimistic, especially with some of the news that's coming out today about how much the Biden administration wants to cut emissions in the next 10 years. Will that necessarily equate to higher federal ITC? I don't know. I'm hoping that at least they will continue to get extended maybe in the next one. Maybe we can hope for something. I always tell people, though, we know what we know right now. We don't know what might happen in the future, right? So for right now, they're at 26%, which is really great. The difference between 26 and 30 isn't all that much. A lot of people installed in 2019 because of the fact that they were ramping down. Even more people installed last year because they thought they were going to go down to 22%. And also a lot of people installed, a lot of homeowners especially installed last year because people were in their house a lot and using more electricity and realizing that they can, offset their costs through some solar. So, I don't know for sure, but I'm certainly very hopeful, but that's about all I can say, unfortunately, on that. And, if you guys want to add anything, go ahead.
It just, at 26% feels like a lot already. We just put our system in and just thinking about getting back 26% of what we invested, over the next year in taxes, tax savings. I feel like we've got it pretty good with residential solar. If there's more incentives, I'll welcome them, but I have a hunch that it just seems like batteries are what is next to me. And I don't know. You can get the federal tax credit now for batteries, but I would wonder if they would start to add more incentives to batteries, because batteries are kind of where, in my opinion, where solar was, maybe 10 years ago. And it's again, early adopters, and it's priced at a point where not everybody can afford it. And so I would suspect if they were going to do policy to support clean energy on residences, that it might shift towards vehicles, but then also the battery storage. Just a hunch, though.
Well, right on cue, the next question is from Mike, and that is, can you use an electric car instead of a fixed battery? I assume that's sort of like as a backup or as an ancillary service, but what do you guys think about that question?
I do not recommend anything you see on YouTube.
Agreed.
But I'll just tell you, we had to have a power outage at our house because we needed to have our solar installed. So they had to do a panel upgrade. And we did run a little camper inverter to keep our Wi-Fi going. Like basically off of our car, we had like a camping inverter, and it's an EV. So, technically we were using the lithium ion battery to charge the little 12-volt battery in our Chevy Bolt. Don't think that really voided any warranties or anything, but obviously that's not the intended use, is to power your home in an outage. When if life and limb is on the line, I guess maybe some of that goes out the window. Certainly no installer is going to help you set that up until maybe later down the road. If those basically, I think the technology is there. And if we ever see vehicle to home backup, it's going to be really cool because you've got a 60 kilowatt hour battery just sitting in your garage. So I hope that makes it probably makes it no less confusing than it was. But it's not something that any of the manufacturers or any, like from a professional standpoint, we could recommend. And it's definitely not designed for that right now.
Okay, this next question is from Roberto again, and that is there a Madison code for solar panel installations, and do old homes qualify with this for this technology?
So that's based on your electrical infrastructure, which during our site assessments, we would tell you, hey, this is way out of code. You might want to get this looked at. Most houses can handle it just fine though. We rarely run into issues, but in the event that we run into something that's going to cost a ton of money, MG&E wants you to fix something, we would tell you what it's going to cost. And if you don't want to go forward, we'd break your contract and give your deposit back. We wouldn't hold it from you like that. But that's few and far between. So.
Yep. And we've gotten pretty good at identifying what those things are going to be, panel upgrades or meter relocations. The utilities will vary as well. So it's not just the City of Madison, but it's also MG&E versus Alliant. And in general, you'll know what those costs might be before you sign a contract. And then, so you've got to, you go in knowing, okay, if we have to upgrade our panel, it's maybe $2,500. If we have to relocate the meter, we know that there's going to be costs associated with that from the utility, and we know there's going to be costs from us. We give you an idea, and same thing. I mean, at the end of the day, we're trying to build systems, but we're not trying to hold people's feet over the fire, and we're going to be willing to work with people. But usually by the time you're ready to sign your contract or shortly thereafter, you should know within a day or two if there's going to be any weird stuff. I'm not an electrician, so if I do your visit, I might not pull your panel cover off, but when we have an electrician come by later, that's a process that might identify, some electrical issues as well when they're there for that.
Okay, we have one last question, and I'm going to give it to you guys first because I'm probably going to have to throw in my hat here, unfortunately, but maybe not unfortunately, maybe that's the wrong word to use. Do you anticipate Madison area net metering regulations will be more, same, or less favorable in the years ahead between Alliant and MG&E? Have you, and your question is probably more the second question here. Between Alliant and MG&E, have you found one to be more aligned with the interests of residential solar owners?
So I guess I'll start with the MG&E is definitely favorable in our eyes. Their net metering policy is better, and they do let us get away with more. I don't say get away with, but let us do more to make sure you get a system that you need. We do everything up to code, don't worry. Alliant can be very strict, and they're not consistent with their rules either. They can say one thing at one project and then change their mind about another project, and it gets really stressful sometimes. But yeah, MG&E definitely is the nicer one to us, at least. I don't know if Arch experienced something different, but yeah.
Yeah, I remember there was a day where Alliant would literally let you install as much solar as you want. It didn't matter how much you used. You could install 50 kW worth of solar. And I remember in 2015 when they changed that, I'd like to say that I didn't swear for like days straight, but I was angry. It cost me projects at the time. And fast forward all these years later, and Alliant is still, their MG&E is typically easier to work with. Their policies are more forgiving. Alliant, in their defense, has more miles of line per customer. They've got more territory to cover. So we've gotten pretty good at working with them, and our operations team, we're kind of specialized a little more, where we've got 6 people up there at the main office that all they do is deal with the utilities, deal with the permitting. And so they build a relationship, like I'm sure the folks at Full Spectrum have, where, you know what to expect a little bit more from some of the different trickier folks, I guess, if you will. And the one thing I would say as far as MG&E goes, it's a very favorable policy up until you become a net annual producer. So as long as you stay under your annual consumption level with your export, you're going to be fine with MG&E. But they do have kind of a unique net metering where if you exceed that for a 12-month period, there's some penalty for that next month until you're a net consumer again. Whereas Alliant, the advantage is you could go with 110%, 120% thinking about future electrification, electric cars, things like that. And then that way, you know, you oversize the system now, and all of the estimate will show you, the estimate we present will show you the bar graph of like your production and your consumption. In the months where you have excess in Alliant territory, that excess portion is credited at a lower rate, but the rest is still full retail. So all that'll be factored into your estimate. They're both, you know, MGE's rates are also higher, so it makes the paybacks better, you know, and their time of use is better. But at the end of the day, like, I was very anti-utility when I started in this business, and I realized at the end, like, they have a really hard job. And like, I think sometimes in this business, we forget how nice it is that the lights are just always on, and that they have like 20 or 30 solar installers calling them with their queue of projects, and all of us want them to drop everything and get. So I don't want to. I don't know if I should be talking how nice the utilities are, but you know, they're people too, I guess.
It's very political, a very
diplomatic,
nice way to diplomatic way to answer that question. Yes. Yeah, you know, on the policy side of things, you know, I again, just like the question about the Biden administration, I remain optimistic that net metering policies can improve. You know, Renew would certainly like to see, you know, some standardization. You know, what exactly that looks like remains to be seen, of course, but it would just be nice if we could have, you know, not wildly different policies between, you know, Alliant or MGE or Excel or, you know, whoever. We would just like, we obviously would like to see them all improved, but we would just like for some consistency to make these guys' lives easier, because they have to go through a whole different process when they are designing a project in Alliant territory versus MGE territory. And most of that doesn't really revolve so much around residential arrays, and these guys can definitely speak to that more, but it just would make everyone's lives a lot easier. And certainly from a consumer standpoint, it would make things a lot better as well. So unless you guys have anything to add there, that's, I think, we might leave it. So yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us again on Earth Day. Really appreciate great participation from you all. So thank you so much. I will also put my email in the chat. Guys, if you want to put yours in the chat as well, that would be great. If you think of questions later on, certainly drop us a line and let us know. But otherwise, thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody. Happy Earth Day.